Okay, so again, thank you for, sharing a little bit of your Saturday. I know we all value our weekend, so I appreciate you taking the time to, have this conversation. There's a few of these conversations that I've had so far. I'm not sure if you looked at any of the ones I referred to on the YouTube channel, but the purpose of these conversations are to of course, obviously talk to, book collectors as well. But, to also, one of the things that's been more important to me as I have these conversations is kind of this leaving a record. We know we live in a interesting, political climate, and unfortunately, Black books have probably always been under a level of assault. But I think, now it's moving at accelerated rate. I was just reading something the other day. I don't know if you all saw where somewhere in Knoxville they've taken Roots off the shelf. And the post was about kind of the controversy because Roots depicts slaves being beaten, which I don't know how you can tell a story and omit that information. They are taking it off the shelf. Um, and so, again, thank you so much for having this conversation. If you want to just, kind of give those who may not be on Substack or familiar, an overview about who you are and, how why you decided to be on Substack. You can, talk about yourself as a collector, why specifically Black anthologies or anything, that you would like to tell us, kind of just to frame our conversation.
Hello, my name is Makeila Nevette. I am a writer, data curator, researcher, photographer, and book collector, originally from Savannah, Georgia, currently located in Alabama. Um, I got on Substack, I think, because I got to a point with social media where I was like, I just want to talk to people who understand. I think that's where it started and just kind of that yearning for a writing community. I got on the platform, I think I made my account in like 2023. I didn't actually post anything until 2024, and then I wasn't really active until last year. Um, but I think it was community, and I think I was kind of wrestling with, can I call myself a writer if I don't actually post anything? Can I call myself a writer if nothing's published? So I just wanted to put myself out there, see what happened. And I ended up coming across really, really, really amazing individuals whose work I feel like motivated me to become a better writer and engage more deeply with my own writing. I think it was one of those things I was so used to writing academically that I was like, anything that I'm passionate about, like I'll just keep it in my journal. It's fine. Like convincing myself I'm writing for me, no one else has to see it. Um, and so yeah, I think I put my first post up. Um, and I will say the likes, I was like, oh, people like my work. Oh my gosh, okay, I like this. And I just kept going. And I think I've stayed on the platform because I've really come across an amazing community of Black writers who engage with so many different styles and who I can tell really write because they love to write and not so much they're looking for um, a like or a follow, things that we kind of encounter when we're on like Instagram or we're on TikTok. I could tell people are really writing because this is what they really love to do. Um, and I got into book collecting, I think kind of naturally. I've always been an avid reader. I grew up reading, like the Magic Treehouse series and Amelia Bedelia. So I was really into like lit fic and fantasy. And as I got older, I was like, okay, I need to expand my palette. I've been reading all these textbooks. I need something that's really gonna get me back into it. And I read Gloria Naylor's Mama Day. And from there, it just kind of opened the door for me. And then I found Beloved by Toni Morrison. And then I was going back to Zora Neale Hurston, and it just kind of built out from there. And then as far as anthologies, my aunt lended me a book that I have not given back because I don't want to give back. And it was the poetry of the Negro 1946 through 1970. Um, and this is like my most prized possession. I believe it is a first edition as well. So she's definitely not getting this back.
Has she asked about the book?
She has not. And I
Okay.
actually just moved and she helped me. And I was like, please don't look at the bookshelf. Please don't look at the bookshelf because you're going
Maybe
to want
she's
this
doing
back,
it on
girl.
purpose. Maybe she's doing it on purpose. Like, you know what? Maybe, it's better off with me.
Yes. We're going to assume that because I'm never going to bring this book up ever again. And I really hate that for her because she was gifted this book. And I was like, I don't know, girl. I think I'm supposed to keep this. I don't know. Um, and so I got this book and I was like, I need to find more like this. Like I'm learning about so many Black authors. I need to really explore. I started with poetry anthologies and then I came across an anthology by Terry McMillan. And I was like, oh my gosh, yeah, this is gonna be a thing. This is happening. This is happening. And it just kind of built out from there. And I think I'm at 37 anthologies now.
Okay.
Um, so yeah, it's been a pretty organic journey, but my why has evolved as I've continued to collect over the years.
Excellent. Thank you.
Mhm,
So I know on Substack you are the creator of Southern-izms.
mhm.
So if you could just tell us, what is Southern-izms, what's your goal, and why is this work important to you?
Yeah, so Southern-isms, I call it a digital love letter to Southern Black American culture and writers. I created it because I just wanted to work with other Southern Black writers. Honestly, I wanted to collaborate. I wanted to find more of us. Like I would be on Substack. Oh, you're writing Southern Gothic literature? Immediately, yes. I'm immediately subscribing, and I'm seeing who you're subscribed to, and I was like, there has to be an easier way to do this. So I put out a call and got to work with some really amazing writers. My goal, it started out with just wanting, I guess, to put myself out there, honestly, and just write about a culture that I love so much and announce that Black Southern culture is not monolithic. People from Georgia have a totally different culture, swag from people from Tennessee and then Texas, and we have a lot that unites us and a lot of things that are similar, but there's so many different little isms, and that's where the name came into play. Um, and now it's evolved to I want us to be taken seriously. A lot of contemporary writers, I want us to be taken seriously, and not just the ones who are mainstream and the ones that you can find when you go to a Barnes and Noble or you go to these major bookstores. We're here and we're writing work that doesn't just involve a slave narrative. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but I do find if you look it up, those are the kind of books that you're getting. And I want to hear more about Southern Black love stories. I want to hear more about family sagas. I want to dive into that because, again, our culture isn't monolithic, so our literature isn't monolithic. And I really want to shine a light on that. Um, so, yeah, I hope when people engage with the work and as it continues to expand, um, one, they enjoy it. They really take the time to let it sit with their spirit. And then after, just pay attention to the ways you're engaging with Southern Black writers. Pay attention to the Southern Black writers that you're uplifting. Again, not just the ones that you see on the shelves or not just the ones that you see on TikTok that, get a lot of traction. Really engage with these Southern Black literary magazines because people are putting out amazing work and people are writing entire book series on Substack. Um, so yeah, and I do hope to one day create and compile my own Southern Black anthology because there's only one actually out that is a pretty decent um, collection of works. And it's actually one of the first anthologies I bought for myself. So I'm like, okay, we got to make another one. Like, we got to get this done. So yeah.
And you kind of alluded to the next question I had about if you think Southern Black literature kind of gets boxed into a stereotype. I know you mentioned, you want to, read something beyond kind of the history of slavery and whatnot, even though that's a part of Black history. You know, with that being said, do you feel like that a lot of Southern Black literature kind of gets stereotyped? Is that one of the reasons, why you want to connect with other, Southern writers?
I do. I feel like there's a lot of Black Southern writers we don't know, and because of that, I think there's this expectation where if you're writing a Southern narrative, you're writing something like a Beloved, or you have to be to that caliber, or you're writing something like Their Eyes Were Watching God. And I think as more contemporary fiction has come out, like your S.A. Cosby's and your Tayari Jones, I think it shined a light on the fact that there's so much to explore, and you shouldn't pigeonhole any one Black Southern author, just because, these are the works that you're used to seeing. Even when you get into like a Gail Jones, she deserves more attention to her work. And you get into like Daughters of the Dust, like there's a book. You get into The Conjure Woman and Jubilee and all these other things. There's so many things that we can write about, and I don't want people to hold one expectation for Southern Black writers. There's an incredible Southern Black literary canon, incredible poets, incredible Black Gothic literature. And while that does touch on slavery and it does touch on Reconstruction, people are expanding what that genre is. And so I just want us to be a bit more open minded, and really, again, take the time to research these authors, to see what's out there now. Because from Beloved until now, I mean, the canon is incredible. And I love that people like Tayari Jones and S.A. Cosby is getting their light and getting their time, because I feel like, one, it's saying we're here, but also it's not just an author from one specific place. There's incredible writers from South Carolina that I don't ever hear about, like a Eden Royce. She's incredible, but she doesn't get the shine that she does. And yeah, I want us to expand and grow, and I want us to have the space to expand and grow. And also remember, there's nothing wrong with writing anything regarding slavery, but there's so many other things that we also like to write about.
For sure. And Simone is also a writer. I'm sorry to speak for you, Simone, and she lives currently in the Atlanta, Georgia area. So I don't know, Simone, if you had any thoughts about, some of the things that Makeila was saying as it
Yeah,
relates
no,
to
I
Southern writers.
Yeah, like I totally understand. I also really love that you are honing in on the Southern aspect as well, because I think that you made a great point about like the caliber that's, I guess, expected already coming into it, and it's kind of leaving people behind, because sometimes some people write novels because they want to tell, they have a story to tell, and it may not be as deep as you want coming into it, but it's a story of truth, and it's a story that is everyday life, and a lot of times I think a lot of those type of authors get ignored because maybe they're didn't they're just it's not so philosophical in a lot of ways. Sometimes it's just very simplistic conversation of Black life. And I think that that's important. Those are important stories to tell. Like, I'm a writer myself. I just finished my first novel. I'm knee deep in editing it right now. And I just love the idea of just Black people using our imagination to tell the stories that we are familiar with, the stories that are just never spoken about. So I think that that's a very important. Like I said, the Southern aspect that you're pointing at is very important, because the reality is a lot of Black people are migrating back south right now. And it's very much a creative hub, which is a project I'm about to start working on, which I need to talk to you guys about. But anyways, so it's very much a creative hub. And I think that's an important aspect to talk about, because we are here. We may not be loud, like we may not be getting the recognition, but we are here. So I love that. I absolutely love that.
For sure. This conversation reminds me of how I know there's conversations that prop up like with Black movies. There's a rom-com now that's at the theater, and I can't think of it if you
Like
all know, but
Beauty and Tuscany, that one.
yeah, I think so. And I was listening to a podcast, Higher Learning, and they were saying that Black people need to go out and support this film because this is going to determine whether Hollywood wants to continue to invest dollars into making more Black rom-coms. And so I'm thinking to myself, so you're telling me that this one film we have to, and I'm not saying that people should not go out and support it, but the conversations like that just kind of are frustrating to me, that it's so high stakes in order for people to want to invest in our culture. And when you were mentioning the thing about books, I think I think the kind of precarious spot sometimes that with Black culture is that we are not invested in the ways in which other cultures are. And then, as you were saying, like we have these huge kind of canonized novels like Beloved, or The Color Purple. And so then that's kind of, everyone feels like they have to hit that benchmark, and then it kind of gets into this larger conversation about Black exceptionalism. And I always think about this. I won't get too deep in it, but this joke that Chris Rock talks about all the time of how Black people, we have to be exceptional. We have to be the Frederick Douglasses of the world and the Barack Obamas, and you know other cultures don't have a benchmark that has to be quite that high. And that's and they can still be successful, still have the support, but don't have to be that high. And so I think what you were, welcome, Nubia. Um, so I think that what you were saying was, very important, that we write in all genres, and that's important, and our work should be supported as such. Um, so what conversations are you hoping, and you may have already kind of alluded to this, or talked about it, but what conversations are you kind of hoping your readers engage with Southernisms or your Substack in general?
Oh, okay. For my Substack in general, I feel like um I write a lot about Black spirituality and eroticism. And I actually, a conversation I want to have is how those two typically intersect. It came from me reading, I can't remember the person who wrote the article. I will try and find it after this. But they were writing about how queer The Color Purple is. Um, and I was like, oh, because it's one of those things I saw as a kid, and I was like, okay, cool. Like, this is a cool plot line. Love that. But as I've gotten older, I was like, okay. And I feel like for me, The Color Purple has a lot of spiritual elements. So I was like, okay, how do these things intersect? And I have a piece called A Prayer to a Lover, and it talks about kind of having your lover meet you at your candles, and it has a lot of like spiritual iconography and everything. So I would love to engage in more conversations about that. That's kind of a very personal interest that I think I started sharing more on the platform. I also do incorporate a lot of hoodoo elements. I think Nubia just sent a message
Yeah, I
about
was just gonna
that.
say, yeah, well, she said that she still thinks about the piece that you did on Hoodoo, to this day. If I'm It came up and then went away. Yeah, she said you did a dope
Yes.
piece on Hoodoo that I still think about.
Thank you. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I'm very deep in hoodoo. I would definitely consider myself a hoodoo. I don't know if I can call myself a practitioner just yet. I don't know if I'm there yet. But I love writing about it because being from the South, I mean, hoodoo is ingrained in, I feel like, damn near everything that we do, from the way that we engage with our understanding of what spirit is, our relationship with the church and religion, even like just our cultural practices, you know, like pouring one out for the homies is an example I love to give, and having a mantle full of loved ones that have passed on, you know. So I love diving into that. I think the piece that Nubia is mentioning, I wrote in collaboration with a publication called Black Stack. And it was I think I titled it Meet Me at the River. Yes. Okay, cool. I thought so. Um, I believe it's titled Meet Me at the River, and it talks about me going through I was grieving. I lost a few loved ones in 1 year last year. And this piece was one that I'd written bits and pieces of, but I was like, so like it's just not writing out right. Like I gotta walk away from it and come back, because I always feel like as a writer, you get the idea, but you have to almost be in a very specific place for certain pieces to build themselves out. And so the creator, Jackie, came to me and she was like, I need you to write something. I was like, shit, like I'm grieving, girl. I'm gonna try. I'm gonna get something to you. And it was talking about how my grief had kind of manifested itself into this physical thing that was holding me back from my own healing. And I was letting it, because I felt like, you know, I'm going through this. I don't know what else to do. And kind of having my ancestors come and be like, girl, you just got to listen to us. You're sitting in this. It's time to get up out of it. You got to get up out of it. Um, and it was the piece was kind of multiple dreams that I had that I compiled together, and in the end, I kind of it ends with me being embraced by loved ones and going to the river and washing away that grief and allowing myself to just breathe and be. And I think writing that piece made me realize, like, no, I want us to talk about hoodoo a bit more. I want us to talk about spirituality, but also I want us to look at the ways we engage with grief in our writing, um, because I feel like writing is one of those things, you love it, but as a writer, it's like, damn, I gotta sit down and write. Like, sometimes it's very laborious. But it definitely is a tool to help you get through those emotional blockages. And I feel like when you're really tapped in, your writing can carry you through. And so, to make a long story short, I would say grief, the relationship between eroticism and spirituality. And then for Southern-isms, I just want us to talk about more Southern Black writers. Like at its most purest point, I want us to engage with more Southern Black writers on the platform. I follow so many, but it took a minute for me to actually find them and find these stories if they didn't have like a very huge following. And I want us to talk more about Black narratives and the ones that we're engaging with and the ones that we're lifting up in literature and in media beyond. How you touched on, you know, there's this pressure of you got to support this one movie, or they not gonna give us money. And it's like we show up, like you know, we show up for our people. And especially when you get into art spaces, it's so many Black indie filmmakers that I'm like, no, we we show up. We love on our people, but there's this idea of if we can't see it, then it's not valid. And it feels so much like a performance. So I want us to engage critically with what we are, or analyze critically what it is that we're engaging with in the narratives that we're uplifting, because it does matter, especially right now. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. And I'm gonna go back and read this piece is on Substack that Nubia is referring
Yes,
to.
it's on
Okay, I'll
Substack.
go back
Yeah.
and read that because I think, you know, I'm sure your piece helped a lot of people because we all go through grief. And I think even if you're not writing about it, grief is such a, I kind of hate to use this word, but it's such a burdensome emotion that a lot of us struggle with you know, dealing with it, even if you're not writing about it or have an outlet. And so I'm definitely gonna, you know, go back and read that piece. Um, are there some Southern writers that you, I know we've mentioned some, but some Southern writers that you kind of look up to, or maybe mentors or some that you're inspired by with your own writing, or just you just admire in general?
Um, I feel like the default, um, Toni Morrison, of course, Zora Neale Hurston, of course. Toni, because that woman can write. Like she writes works. I've realized that you really don't need to, you almost don't need to read it on your own. You really do need to dive into it with community.
Mm,
Because every time I read her work, especially Beloved, I'm like, oh, I didn't notice that. Oh, I didn't notice that. And her works are very layered. Like the language itself isn't difficult, but what she writes is so dense.
mm,
And I really admire that because that really takes a certain level of awareness and scholarship to be able to do that. Zora Neale Hurston, because she was the first writer that I saw write in a Southern dialect. And I was like, oh, I can do that. Oh,
mm,
okay. Um, and I didn't really think about it before, not that I feel like I needed permission, but it's different when you can see something that you engage with, casually and you realize, I don't see this very often. I can do this. Okay, dope. Gloria Naylor. Oh my gosh. I would preach Gloria Naylor every day. I love that woman. Mama Day completely changed the way that I write because I was like, okay, I really do like, yes, Gloria is cold with it. Nubia, yes. She's so dope. And I love her storytelling. I love that each character feels full and whole. I don't feel like she writes any characters that can be thrown away. So I love that. Gosh, I'm getting into Margaret Walker. I love her as a poet. I love her as a novelist. I'm exploring Jubilee right now. Love her. I feel like there's so many. I'm like looking around at my books right now because I'm like, I know I'm forgetting someone. Julie Dash. I love her as a filmmaker, but I also love her as a. Yes. Thank you, Nubia. You're tapped in. I love that. Julie Dash, I did not know that Daughters of the Dust, she wrote a book for it. So
mm,
I'm also exploring the book. I love her as a writer. I feel like she does a great job of giving you everything without having to say too much,
mm.
which is a skill that I, as an author who can definitely yap and yap, love. So I would say those, and Gail Jones, phenomenal. Love her.
Excellent. All, you know, great books. When you mentioned Margaret Walker, maybe a lot of people knew, but I recently learned about kind of, the I don't know if she would classify as a tragedy, but the controversy she got involved in because she accused Alex Haley of stealing her story and
Mhm.
Jubilee, and went through a series of lawsuits, and unfortunately lost them. And then Alex Haley was also accused by some other person who did want a lawsuit, I think a white gentleman, of he plagiarized from him. And so it just was, a tragedy because it's like, Alex Haley, Roots is just like one of those staples in Black culture. And, you don't know whether he's telling the truth, whatever. I don't want to get too
Mhm.
far into that. But um, Nubia said a hot mess. Everybody can't be lying. Right, right. Um, but I know you talked about the anthology that you first got from your aunt, because I had some questions about, was there a particular book that started your collection, which you mentioned that already. Um, but what do you think Black anthologies preserve that individual works sometimes cannot, if that makes sense?
Um, First, I would say it preserves voices that don't get a lot of shine. Like, I have Black Southern Voices, an anthology of fiction, poetry, drama, nonfiction, and critical essays. And I was writing a collaborative piece for a Southern reading list with Afro Reads. And I was looking up a few of these authors, and when you look them up, you don't find anything about them. I mean,
Mm,
I was hitting Internet Archive. I was like, let me go to JSTOR. Let me try and find some peer-reviewed articles, and nothing. So I would say one, of course, voices that, might have put out one book and it was phenomenal at the time, but we don't have access to the text anymore, or people just don't know about it. I think as well, anthologies do a really great job of highlighting the zeitgeist of the literature at the time. And that's one thing I love. I treat every anthology as a time capsule, because I think the oldest one that I have is from the 1930s. And so it starts there. And I think the most recent one that I have is up to maybe the 2010s. And so seeing what was being published, what got to be on the shelf, what were we interested in writing about. um, a lot of people know, of course, the Harlem Renaissance, and you have Kane by Jean Toomer, and of course Zora, and you have all these amazing people. But I was like, I feel like I don't really know about what we were writing about beyond then. Um, and then, of course, you have Tony, you have Alice Walker, you have Tony K. Bambar, you have them. But it was just so many gaps for me. And I was like, as a writer, I feel like, and as a Black woman writer, I feel like I have a responsibility to know these voices that came before me, that one, opened doors, but also explored narratives that other people honestly were kind of scared to explore or just wasn't interested in. And I think finally, I think it is a demonstration of what can happen when Black writers come together and have the opportunity to shine a light on authors that they really love. I really pay attention to who it was edited by, any acknowledgments. And I think it's interesting seeing other Black writers be excited to platform colleagues and even smaller voices at the time, and seeing what their motivations were. So, yeah, and I feel like anthologies are a form of ancestral work. And so, especially people who are compiling anthologies from writers who have since passed, I love seeing how writers from then influenced the editor's work, and then exploring the editor's work and seeing who they influence, and kind of seeing how everything kind of functions as a portal into one another. Um,
Yeah,
yeah.
for sure. And I think when I look at anthologies too, like if I kind of want to get a snapshot of, what the leading thinkers were in a certain area, like for example, the Black Fire, the one that was edited by Mara Baraka
Mhm.
and I think Larry Neal, that was that's one I go to. Yeah, yes, exactly. Right, right. Oh, you have a hardback. Um, you can get like I think a good snapshot of kind of what the conversations were at the time. And I was looking at these two anthologies um that I thought I had, but I'm gonna have to re-get it. But it's Cavalcade. There's like a volume one and a volume two. There
Mhm.
was one volume, and I don't know why these names are slipping me, but the first volume, and when you mention editors, I feel like the editors that are selected for anthologies are like so important because the editors kind of influence the voices that they choose to include in that anthology and the ones that they choose not to include. And so this particular anthology, and I should have had it out about this conversation. Cavalcade, the editors, I'm sorry, for volume one were, selected pieces that kind of were in the more traditional style and canon of Black literature from like, the 1700s up to, I don't know, like the 90s at the time. But then they came out with a part two where they included this woman. Um, and so she brought in, more nationalistic text and things like that into it. So it gave it a fuller picture than what this, volume one stated. So I think that is, important to look at too. I know when I'm looking at anthologies, I definitely look at, who is the editor of this anthology. I was looking at um a book, an anthology that I think Gwendolyn Brooks was the editor of. It was different pieces of poetry that she took I think from Broadside Press and different poets at the time. And so I think, that kind of, and I think you mentioned the one anthology that you mentioned that Terry McMillan was the editor of.
Mhm.
Was that one called like Breaking Ice or
Yes,
something
I
like that?
actually have it right here. Yes, this is one of the first ones that I bought myself. And I mean, it's a lot of authors in that
It is, and it's funny because that is like I remember my mom having that book like on her. Yes, Simone, you were ready to go with your with your anthologies are already out.
Sorry, they're
But
behind me. That's what makes sense.
but Breaking Ice was like one of the books I vividly remember. Like it was popular like in the 90s. That's when I grew up. I think I'm older probably than you all, but when I grew up in the 90s, like that book was like, and Terry McMillan, of course, that was kind of her when she was at her, highest popularity was in the 90s. So it makes sense they would have her edited something. But I remember that book being on my mom's nightstand and it being, dog-eared and, in an acceptable condition, I guess you would say. So thank you for mentioning that. It definitely, took me back to that book. So let's see here. Are there certain themes or eras that you find yourself returning to most in your collection? I know you say you're up to 30 some anthologies. Is there a particular, you know, like I say, theme or era that we talked a lot about the South. I don't know if, most of those are, Southern writers or are you pretty eclectic in, your anthologies, or is there some type of recurring themes or eras in your collection?
Not at the moment. I will say at one point I was really into researching the Harlem Renaissance, and then I had a moment where I was really into African American folk tales. And I was like, I gotta find them, I gotta find them, I gotta find them. I feel like in terms of when I'm buying anthologies, I just kind of go with whatever I'm inspired by at the moment. I don't feel like I have a rhyme or a reason. Right now, well, I guess I kind of do have one right now. I'm really wanting to explore more African writers. I was looking at my shelf and I was like, everybody's black, but I need to get more books from, throughout other places in the diaspora. And I have a few Caribbean writers. Like I have Edwidge Danticat. I have I cannot remember her name, but I have she wrote um it's not gonna come to me because I'm sitting there trying to think about it. But
That's
I do want to explore more African authors, so I am looking for anthologies. Um, I would say in that. Other than that, theme, I don't know if there's um a specific theme. I think the only kind of anthology I don't have is one for Black fantasy writers. So that'll probably be next in the queue. But yeah, I would definitely say African writers I'm trying to find more of. Because when looking at certain conversations for Black literature, I feel like not that Black Americans aren't talking about it, but I do find that more African writers are talking about African writers. And I was like, I don't feel well versed enough. I need to read more. And I think Afro Reads and there's a couple other platforms has really inspired that. Because I was like, dang, like this sounds good. Why have I never heard of this? And it's like, because I'm gonna have to do the extra work to find it. And that's okay for me. Um, but yeah, so I probably have like 6 books in my cart right now that I'm probably gonna buy up within like the next month and a half.
Okay. Yeah, Nubia was saying Afro Reads does a great job with that. They do. I subscribe to them and they I think I've restacked some stuff. They really do a great job. When you mentioned Black folktales, what's your um opinion or comfortability with like the Joel Chandler Harris, like white, I know it was a different era or whatever
Mhm.
when he wrote these things, but when white people are writing books in Black dialect, which do you have an opinion, if any, on?
I I feel like my face says it. I
Okay.
am, I feel like I'm hypercritical regardless.
Okay.
Um, but when it comes to folk tales, I'm gonna be honest, I only want to hear it from us. I really do. I do. I feel like there's a certain spirit that we incorporate into these stories that can only really be ignited if we're telling the stories. Um, and I would say it's kind of like how I feel about majority white university choirs singing hymnals, black hymnals. I'm like, I'm glad y'all learning, but I don't know. Maybe it's just me. I want us to be singing that. You know, it's just, I feel like it's certain things we just have a very specific relationship with. And when it comes to Black storytelling, specifically our folk tales, for me, there's a very spiritual aspect. Whether the person telling the folk tale is fully aware of it or not, there's some sort of ancestral memory there that we tap into. And a lot of folk tales is about the way that you tell the story, whether you're communicating it verbally or whether it's written. And so, yeah, I really only want to hear it from us, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, yeah, I feel that. And I there was a conversation, or it kind of turned into a debate or whatever. This group on Facebook, I think it's Black Girls Read Too or something, but somebody had posed this question about, is it okay for, Black authors to write white characters, and vice versa. And so, the comments, it got pretty contentious.
Mhm.
So, on the backs of that question, do you have, sort of an opinion on, should folks be writing about cultures that are not necessarily their own, in their writing? If you feel comfortable talking. If not, we can
Oh
we
no,
can
I can
move
talk about it.
on.
Yeah, I think when these conversations are had, I feel like I go back to a Toni Morrison interview, well, a few interviews that she had where she was kind of asked something similar. Um, I feel like people of other cultures can write about someone else's culture. I I feel like it is possible? Yes. However, comma, we have to be very careful with how we engage with other people's cultures when it comes to the conversation. Because I feel like outside of this context, Black writers talking about this conversation and you take it to a broader audience, I feel like it comes up a lot when specifically white writers are trying to defend writing about people of color, especially Black folks. And when you get into that, I just feel like so much of our work and our culture is consumed that for me, it's very difficult for me to not look that deep into it. Like I'm currently reading The Delectable Negro by Vincent Woodard because I'm writing a piece about Negro philiacs in the art world and media. And I just feel like so much it's not always written from a point of appreciation, but more so consumption. A lot of times it very much feels like um, one, it's either, well, I feel like I've done enough research, so nobody can tell me I can't write about this thing, as if an entire culture can be compiled into something easily digestible. But two, it comes from, I feel like sometimes it reads as this is something that I in one way or another enjoy consuming. And so I'm going to write about this in a way that feeds into that for me and other people who like to consume it. I don't know if that made sense, but there's
Yeah.
um there's a quote Woodard said where he basically was like, before we even thought about race, we had to deal with how does it feel to be an edible thing? and how does it feel to be consumed spiritually, physically, and in every other way. And I feel like it feels like that. And it's very rare to come across an author that gets it right. And unfortunately, the people who can get it right are not the people who are mainstream. It's a very niche community that's like, no, you guys need to read this, and they're just not getting their just due. So I feel like it's really, really complicated. And if you're going to do it, I need you to know your why. Why are you really wanting to write this? Does your characters have a full range of possibilities of that you can explore? Like, are they just flat? Are they a gimmick? Are they, just comedic relief? Because I feel like that's how they write a lot of it. Do you really understand what you're writing? Have you truly explored? Who have you talked to about this? Or is it just you kind of wanting to do this thing and you're not engaging with people of that culture? Um, so yeah, I feel like that answer was very complicated, but
Oh,
people need to take it seriously if you're going to do it.
yeah, absolutely. And Nubia wrote in the comments, they don't do the work to be able to write about us. It's always exploitation and at
Yes.
our expense, which is true. I don't know if you all have seen kind of I don't know if it's debate, whatever going on online. I can't remember his name, but the white guy who like was one of the architects of Project 2025, and he's head of the Heritage Foundation.
Yes.
And they said he wrote his dissertation about kinship in Africa. I can't remember what specific tribe, and his major was he has a PhD or whatever in history, but I guess he had a concentration in African American study.
Well, I also think they write it from the standpoint of trying to be from the standpoint of I researched all this and now I'm an expert, as opposed to writing it from the standpoint of curiosity. So, like, if you're writing something from the standpoint of curiosity, of like, I just want to explore this topic, and as I'm what I'm writing is to explore this, not because I have the answers, not because I know it all, but because I actually am very curious, genuinely curious. Let me say it like that. Not to explore, not the other one, but I'm saying like you're genuinely curious. I think that would come off better than coming into it acting like you know it all. Because a lot of times, and I think there's already an inherent idea that I do think I know more than you coming into it as
Hmm.
well. So that's this is very like imaginative thinking I'm saying right now, but I think that that's already that's like their baseline. It starts there.
Yes.
I already know as soon as I read this, I already know more than you coming in. That's their baseline. So now I'm going to read about you. Now I'm really going to know. And then now I'm giving you whatever if whatever from that. I think in the historical aspect, that's terrible. That's not. I don't like that, and I also think that now I have seen Black authors like Lisa Cross Smith. She's one of my favorite fiction authors. She's black woman, but I've seen her write characters in her books that they're not all Black, but there's a mix, there's a cultural the areas that she writes in make sense to the character. So it's not that not all the characters are Black, but she knows how to. I know when I'm reading this character, oh, this is not a Black man or not a Black, might be a white man, or this might be the main character is always a Black woman, or stuff like that. So there's a lot of different conversations with like, are we talking fiction? Are we talking whatever? But I feel like overall, though, if other people they're coming in, they already have the baseline of I already know more than you anyway,
Yeah.
and that's where the problem is, I think.
And I think to also piggyback, that's such an academic thing to say, just to piggyback off of you. But no, literally, to piggyback off of you, specifically white academics, there's this thing of I have the degree, you don't. But and my issue one is there's I had a friend say there's a lot of academics who ain't got no sense. So don't think because they have PhD or whatever behind their name, they just got it like that. Um, but uh it's this thing of thought versus action. Like you get so caught up in the research and everything being within these four walls as you're typing on this computer, you don't actually even engage with the community that you're writing about. You know, where we're seen as like a spectacle. And I think even more than that, their understanding a lot of times of race and what it actually means to be Black outside of, oh, Black people talk like this, Black people eat this food, you know, Black people go to church, you know, things that I don't even like saying mainstream, but has kind of become mainstream because popular culture has just taken it and ran with it because this is what they feel is most accessible and easily digestible about Black culture.
Well, think
Um,
about Good Times, how Good Times were written, like Norman Lear, that the right.
yeah,
I think of him when you said
yeah, like
Yeah, but then
it's
but then there's the guy who claimed Norman Lear stole everything from him.
another great example. Living Single versus Friends.
there it is.
And Friends I ain't see one Black character that actually I don't even know if they had Black people in the background. I'm gonna be
I've
honest.
never watched Friends.
I saw a couple. Thank you, Nubia. It is boring. I saw a couple episodes like when I was young. You know, nobody watching the TV. It's just running. And I'd be like, "Where we at? You in New York, and we ain't nowhere." That was intentional. But it very much feels like a bastardization. We become caricatures, and it's a very toothless way of engaging with Black community. And I think white authors who write about Black characters and they don't have the range, which unfortunately to me is at least like 95% of the time, it feels like they treat it like a here, I gave you something. Aren't you appreciative? And it's like, girl, we got 50, 11 million Black writers writing incredible stories with Black characters who are not flat, who are not just a plot moving device, or you know they'll use some form of trauma that the Black person encounters to make the main character like a better person and have a full character arc. Like, you know, we have Black authors who are writing full Black characters. And I think too, a lot of white writers get it wrong because they're explaining a lot of things. Where if you understood what you were engaging with, you wouldn't have to explain this thing, you know? And I know I keep going back to Toni Morrison, but she said you can tell when a Black writer is writing for a Black audience because they're not explaining things that they know we already know. They can just say it and they know we got it because there's certain cultural nuances that if you don't know, like you're gonna completely miss the ball. And yes, we have interior worlds. We are not a monolith. And even just to touch on Black Southern characters for a second, another reason why I did Southern-isms is because I got tired of the funny country cousin trope. That's what I like to call it. You know, the one that's just very goofy. They treat the character like they're not intelligent. You know, comedic timing, very unaware. You know, country bumpkin. That's how they treat the character. Um,
You never been up north.
that never been up. I've never been to the big city. You know, they treat them like that, and it's like clearly you ain't met nobody from the South. You haven't met enough people from the South. You're not engaging with Black people from the South for real. Because it's always that. Um, and I think that's why Sinners got so much love that it did. Because it was like, oh, like, okay, yeah, we can see us now. We're not just, you know, chewing on straw and wearing overalls and talking about the farm. And while Black farm life and Black country life is a thing, um, in the South, it's just like, I need y'all to engage with the people you want to write about and
For
not
sure.
just engage with the caricatures that media is portraying. because there's so much to explore. And you're not only shortcutting your readers, you're shortcutting yourself.
Right, for sure. And I think it I also think that when Black people write about white, because, you know, white people can sort of exist in a world without having to interact with Black people or even other minorities. Um, Very few of us have the, can't really live in a world just, interacting with Black people. We have a lot of interactions with whites, and I know Nubia had made a comment about um, if there's any Black people who have like made, Irish. Irvin, I think her last name is Painter. She wrote a book called The History of White People. And she talks about, she's Black, of course. She's a professor, and she's written, different nonfiction books. And she, talks about, she got a lot of flack when she wrote that book. I have that book. You said you gave that book straight away? No shit. She talks about like how she got a lot of flack for that book because, white people didn't want to hear a Black woman talking about the history of white people. And, she kind of talks about it kind of like she's a little bit resentful of the fact that I think she mentioned she missed out on some type of award because the book was nominated for some things. And I have the book and it's extremely scholarly. I couldn't really get through, the whole book just because the way it was written. And I didn't have enough interest to learn about the history of white people to want to slog through, that type of academic discourse. That, I'm sorry. But she talks about she got a lot of flack for it. She missed out on awards, what have you, because they just the academia did, they didn't want to hear from her talking about that. And then she kind of juxtaposed it to, there's a lot of white people who teach African American history. I mean, I went to Dillard and this was a HBCU, and I had a professor, a white guy. I mean, he was married to a Black woman. Not that that makes a difference, but and he was like one of the top professors in African American history. Um, so it's a lot of white people who do teach our history all day, every day, and write books about us. One might argue it may be even more books out there written about Black history and African history by whites than even by Blacks. You know, and so Nubia says she did do the work. Yeah, Sojourner Truth was good. I'm glad you mentioned that because I couldn't think of her other books. Um, and I wondered that too, like why she, wanted to write this history. She talks about it. I can't remember what she said, but she does talk about it. Um, you know, I guess I walked into it kind of giving her the benefit of the doubt because she has spent a lot of time in white spaces and being kind of in an ivory tower in academia. Um, you said her brain is right. She wanted to, kind of frame, but again, I didn't finish through it because it was just too, it was too much for my level of interest or what have you. I know we kind of went off on a tangent. Did anybody else want to say anything on this particular point before we kind of move on towards wrapping up? I know it's going on 2 o'clock. Um, so how do books we kind of already went over this, so if this is redundant, you don't have to, answer it. But how do books function as cultural memory, do you believe, or do you think in Black communities? And if you think we've kind of touched on that, we can, go into a different question.
I do feel like we touched on it a little bit, but just to make another point, I think that Black books are a great form of memory work. It's a great form of remembering. It's a great form of, and I know there's a lot of conversation about this. It's a great form of escapism, sometimes being able to read Black authors, to be able to be in a world where it's just us a lot of times. For me, it's like, oh, girl, thank God, because I've been at work and I just kind of need to, I just kind of need to read something that's gonna feel a little bit comforting. Um, so yeah, I feel like it's wonderful memory work, and I think with everything going on right now, with all of the book bans and all of the foolishness and just the hot mess of it all, the hot messification, if you will. um, we're in a time where obviously Black voices are under attack, but our curiosity for Black voices is also under attack. And there's this push to get us away from ourselves, away from our voices, away from our media that censors us. And so I think now more than ever, support Black authors, go to your local libraries, engage with the work, especially as a writer, not just as a reader, but also as a writer. And I think to have more conversations about the styles of contemporary Black writers right now. Because looking at, yeah, I mentioned two people, S.A. Cosby and Tayari Jones, even Jesmyn Ward, looking at the way that they write and, you know, comparing it to writers from the Reconstruction era or from the Harlem Renaissance era, and seeing how much our literature can truly evolve and expand and grow, and our literary canon is continuing to evolve and grow. It's a great way to expand yourself as a writer, expand your interests. Um, and like I mentioned before, like just pay attention to the zeitgeist, like what we're writing right now and what may be written in the next even just 10 years. I mean, there could be a major shift. And so we have to pay attention to what is being written and write about what's going on um, in any form and facet, in any genre, because it's important. And we're going to come to a point, unfortunately, where, you know, we might start seeing our books being burned. I mean,
Yeah,
that's just,
and
I'm
and
sorry, go ahead.
I don't mean to cut you off, but they actually, I don't know if anybody saw the post that Abraham Kendi did a post the other day where they burned his board book, Anti-Racist Baby. Some I don't know who it was. I think they were some type of MAGA supporter or something. Um, but he posted a video of this person who burned his book, Anti-Racist Baby, along with some other, books. So, some people are already doing that. He's goofy, but they didn't need to burn the books.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. I'm so we're kind of coming to a close. I just have a couple of more questions. What does what do Black owned personal libraries mean to you historically and culturally?
Um, I look at libraries as personality markers a little bit. I'm always curious to see what other Black folks have on their shelves. Um, I think as well, personal archiving is so important. Archiving does not need to just happen, and collection does not need to just happen in these major institutions. I know Nubia has talked about that. I know
Mhm.
Simone, all of the work you're doing with the Ebony Collector really honors and signifies that. We have to preserve our voices. We have to preserve our media, our creations, because either there it's not going to happen, or the way that it's happening, it won't be accessible. It'll be behind a paywall, or even worse, it's happening, it's accessible, but to put it frank, it's a bunch of bullshit. Like it's very niche. It's kind of how we talked about anthologies. It's very specific things that they're picking and grabbing to preserve. Um, and so I feel like it's a love letter to Black culture. I feel like it's a love letter to Black artists, but also it's important to when I think of Black libraries, I think about what's being passed down. And so I feel like curating a personal library is such a personal and intimate experience because especially with having access to PDFs and you have Kindle and you have all these digital platforms, taking the time to buy physical media and put it on your shelf and preserve it and take care of it is important. And the people that come after you that will be able to have access to these shelves, they need to see these things because I mean, we don't own a lot of things. So a lot of things we're just, unfortunately, after a while, we're not going to have access to. Um, so yeah, personal libraries are, um, like I said, personality markers, they're love letters, they're archives, there's so many different things. And it it will carry, even if you don't think it'll carry right now, it will carry to the next generation. Whether you sell the books off, you have people and family who want to come and buy them, whether you have, again, people like Simone posting what it is that they're collecting, and it generates curiosity for other people to go and explore these things. I mean, I've seen so many things, Simone, that you've had that I'm like, girl, do not make me buy nothing else.
I know, I mean, everybody tells me, but I want, that's the point. It's like, did you know this existed? Go get it so you can have it, you know? So I get what you're saying.
Definitely. I sent Simone a text earlier because she has posted these press kits from some of Spike Lee's films. And I know I have some movie stills, but I didn't realize, that the production notes and all this literature she was showing. So I went like on eBay last night and like found some from some of the films, Spike Lee's that I have. And I was telling her like, thanks for posting that you just don't know where you just don't know. Like I went to it's this black couple that do these estate sales in Chicago, and they've done an estate sale for like Lerone Bennett Jr., who was
Yeah, I
like
want to throw
one of
up
the
every
editors.
time I see those videos. I really want to throw up because I'm not in Chicago. I get so mad because I know you're right there. Oh
And
my
you
God, drives me
and
crazy.
I learned about them late, so I missed some of the ones, but they have you can go to their website and see some of the past ones. And they're doing one coming up of this woman, Maisie. She was a dancer for like Duke Ellington. So I don't know how they get these historic black people estates, because it's a couple that they have done. And just looking at, going through the pictures and looking at it. And sometimes I kind of think, and I've had these conversations with Nubia, sometimes I kind of think, you know, I feel torn sometimes because I'm like, with some of these people, like, how did this happen? Like, this couldn't be put into like for example, we have a black museum here, the Dusable, which I think is could be a lot better. Like, these things couldn't be maybe, more accessible in a museum, or so you kind of think like how certain items get to where they're at an at an estate sale and not passed on somewhere to where people can
That's
kind
a
of look at
whole
these
nother
things.
conversation. I always wonder that too.
So I feel like kind of even strange, like looking through their things. Like I wrote about some of the books I got from, Maya Angelou's estate. And so you kind of think like, what happened. And as you were saying, Makeila, we don't own a lot of stuff in the first place. And I don't know if anybody saw the interview that Danielle Smith, who used to be the editor of Vibe magazine, she wrote a piece for this black magazine called Tribe in Chicago. So they interviewed her. So she wrote a piece kind of about Quincy Jones and his impact on the culture. And one of the things she was saying was that, there's a lot of black, like Vibe magazine, there's no archive. There was no digitization where you can go and see all of the past issues of Vibe. There's no like kind of record. I mean, Vibe now, you kind of, if you're not getting them on eBay or someone was subscribed to Vibe and had them, we're just kind of finding these things in the ecosystem. But she was saying like, but you can go online and you can see every issue of Rolling Stone or every issue of Playboy or whatever, all of these white kind of publications. They have strong archives. They have, a lot of their things digitized. And we're kind of collecting these things from an individual standpoint. And Nubi and I had this conversation, and I was saying, I think, first of all, our culture is not as valued as others. Maybe there's an issue of money. There's some things that happen with Ebony where I think that could have been democratized. I thought that the National Museum in Washington, D.C. had acquired Ebony's digital archive and was going to have that information available to the public. I've yet to see that. Maybe that's something they're still working on. I don't know. But I think what you're saying, is so true that I just, one of the fears I have is a lot of these things are kind of disappearing. Just and also, people consume media differently now than we used to. I mean, it was nothing, as I said before, I grew up in the 90s. You saw Ebony magazine everywhere. If it wasn't in your home, you saw it when you went to the beauty shop, barber shop, you went to the dentist, whatever. You saw all of these, physical prints of things. Even if you went to an extended family member's house, you may see church fans, but so we saw all of these things everywhere, and people just don't necessarily consume things the same way they do, so you're competing against things just being either digitized or not produced at all. And so that's something I think that even makes what we're doing even more important. So what are you currently reading or searching for now?
Currently, I'm always reading multiple books. Shout out to academia, because now I don't know how to read one book at a time. Okay. I'm reading a few. I mentioned earlier, I'm reading Vincent Woodard's The Delectable Negro, Human Consumption and Homoeroticism Within U.S. Slave Culture. I highly, highly, highly recommend this book. Um, I just started it. Well, I started the physical because I was like, I can't read this on a PDF. I need to add tabs and I need to write. I love to mark up my books. So I'm reading this one. Goddamn. That one is taking me through there a little bit in a very necessary way. Another one is a book I've been wanting for a while. And I've really wanted to get it with everything going on with hyper surveillance, especially in Atlanta, learning about them cameras they trying to set up, um, learning more about AI and its unfortunate presence everywhere. But it is Simone Brown's Dark Matters on the Surveillance of Blackness. Um, I've wanted this book for a few years, so I'm excited to dive into this. I'm just really hitting the intro, so that's fun. I started Sadia Hartman's Wayward Lives, Beautiful Experiments. I was reading that in a group setting and I had to stop because I was like, I'm gonna have to take my time with this. This is just a little heavy. Yes, Simone Brown. And I have PDFs of all of these books as well, because one thing I'm gonna do is have a digital library for my physical library. So if anybody wants a PDF, just message me, let me know. And then for fun, I am getting into Wild Seed by Octavia Butler. Um, she's an author that I love watching her interviews, but I don't feel like I've engaged with enough of her work, especially with them trying to do so many adaptations of her novels. Um, I was like, okay, let me get more into it. And actually, back to Breaking Ice, that's I learned about Wild Seed from this anthology, because it's the Octavia Butler piece that she decided to put in here. Um, so I'm reading that. Yeah, I try and read if I'm reading anything that's a bit more academic. I try to have at least one that I'm just like, we're just reading for enjoyment. I think that's all the books that I'm reading. And I'm always reading a romance of some kind, whether it's urban romance, historical romance. I'm sure I have something queued up in my Kindle that I started maybe 2 weeks ago that I need to get back to and finish.
Hey, thank you. So, are you only on Substack? Is that the only social media that you're currently on? Well, anyway, you can just repeat if people want to find you or follow your work, what they can type in or look up.
I do only really post on Substack, so that's the best place to find me, it's Makeila Nevette. I have a few newsletters. I'm starting up a Black arts and literature newsletter called The Black Dossier, but all of that it'll be under my page. And I will be posting more soon. I'm out of my little hiatus, so I'm ready to get back writing and collaborating and all the good stuff.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Makeila. Everybody I interview, I send them this book that I self-published, The ABCs of Black Bibliophiles,
Ooh.
which is just a little picture book kind of different, Black bibliophiles. So I'll message you to get your mailing information. Yes, thank you. I will.
Simone, I need you like everywhere. I need you to be like my librarian. Whenever I'm looking for a book, I'm gonna hit you up and I'm gonna be like, I know you got it on your shelf.
If
I know
I
you do.
if not, I'll find it, I promise.
But thank you so much. And like I say, I'll message you to get, your contact information. And thank you so much for spending this time. Ladies, did you all have anything you want to say before we wrap up?
No, I mean, this is great, and I definitely will stay in contact and community with you. And then also, you know what? I do have one question. What is one Harlem Renaissance anthology in that time period that you would recommend?
Oh, I love when people ask me about my books. Hold on. I just moved to this apartment and I was fortunate enough to find one that has a book nook. So let me look on my little, as you can see, it's pretty filled up.
Nice.
Um, I would recommend, gosh, okay, let me see. I'm gonna actually recommend you two, if that's okay. One, this isn't so much an anthology as it is an encyclopedia, but it's a great resource to find more anthologies. The Harlem Renaissance or Harlem Literary Renaissance. Highly recommend this one. I got this off of Thrift Books
Okay.
for pretty cheap. I think I got it for like $8. It's pretty expansive, so I recommend that. And then, ooh, this is hard. I recommend let me see. I'm looking at two more right now. I would
Both good.
say The Harlem Renaissance Reader by David Lewis. That one is really good. Um, Also pretty expensive. You learn a lot about Black women writers that did not get their just due. So I recommend that. And I lied, I'm gonna give you another one.
Here you go.
Um, Voices from the Harlem Renaissance, featuring over 120 selections from the political writings and arts of the period. And this was edited by
Can you
Nathan
hold it up?
Huggins.
Let me just take a picture of it. Okay. Okay. Okay.
Yes. I would say those are really great resources. Those are the ones that I go back to the most. So I would recommend those the most.
Great. That was my question. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, thank you so much, Makeila. And like I say, I'll reach out to you with the mailing address and everything.
Yes, thank you for having me. This was such a wonderful conversation. As you can see, I'm a yapper. I love talking about books and literature, and I would actually love to have more conversations with y'all about this. I love learning from other Black book collectors, and I'm sure there's books that you guys have that I don't have that I'm probably actively looking for or don't know that I need. And also, thank y'all for all the work that y'all do as well. I engage with all of y'all's work. Simone, I think you were actually one of the first collectors I followed on Substack. So this is a very full circle moment.
Thank
But yes,
you.
thank y'all for having me, and I hope y'all have a wonderful weekend.
Yeah, you too. I'm also talked to I know Nubia subscribes to her, but Hood Archives, I'm supposed to be, I don't know if you all subscribe to her work, but I'm supposed to be talking to her next month. So I'll send you all out the invitation as well if you want to, if you want to join us. We haven't worked out all the details yet, next month with her, what she's doing with Hood Archives.
Nice.
Got you.
All right. Well, thank you so much. And you all enjoy the rest of your weekend.
I'm gonna send you a DM with my information.
Okay, yes, please do. Okay, have a
All
good
right.
one,
Bye.
y'all.
You
Bye.
too. Bye.